Unit 13, John Dryden, Preface to Fables. The full title of the text is Preface to Fables, Ancient and Modern, translated into verse of Homer, Ovid, Boccaccio, and Chaucer, with original poems 1700. The chief purpose of Dryden in writing Preface to Fable is to show his countryman Chaucer as a great and good poet worthy of admiration. This he achieves by instituting comparison between Chaucer and Ovid on one hand, Chaucer and Boccaccio on the other. The secondary purpose is to defend himself from the attacks made by Milburn and Blackmore and Collier. Dryden also has something to say on the subject of translation and on his own method, which he tries to justify. It represents the theory of translation he had been expounding for nearly 20 years. However, the masterly appreciation and penetrating analysis of Chaucer, much factor, genius, is a preface single invaluable contribution to the history of English criticism. The critical analysis of the text. In the introductory paragraph, Dryden tells us how he began translation of the first book of Homer's Iliad, then proceeded to the translation of the 12 books of Ovid Metamorphoses. The 12 book of Metamorphoses, he went on to translate part of the English book containing the speeches of Ajax and Ulysses. When he translated the 15th book of Metamorphoses, which he regarded as the masterpiece of the whole work. On the other hand, he has translated some more stories from the book 8 as well as 10. Dryden compliments George Sandys, another translator, as the best versifier of the previous age. Dryden describes both Spenser and Fairfax as great masters in our language. Dryden says that Milton himself had acknowledged to him that Spenser was his original. Similarly, Spenser had admitted the soul of Chaucer was transfused into the body. Translation of Chaucer and Boccaccio. Dryden says that he thought of translating Chaucer because he found a great deal of resemblance between him and Ovid. Dryden confesses that he has always been careful to promote the honor of his country. The result was that some of the Canterbury tales were translated into more refined English language. Both were contemporaries, pursued the same studies, both moreover refined their mother tongue. The reformation of Italian prose was due wholly to Boccaccio. As for Chaucer, he was the first to adorn and amplify our parent tongue from the province. Here he identifies that Boccaccio refined his mother tongue Italian, whereas Chaucer refined his mother tongue English when English was in the beginning stage. Dryden's own poems juxtaposed with that of Chaucer and Boccaccio. To all these translations from Homer, Ovid, Chaucer, Boccaccio, Dryden added some poem of his own. He says, only difficulty is to choose or to reject, to run them into verse or to give them the other harmony of prose. Neither will he trouble his reader with the shortness of time in which he wrote it. Dryden remarks that the reader is likely to ask them why they did not allow a longer time to make their works more perfect. Dryden criticizes himself. Dryden stoutly refuses that he has ever written anything which is immoral and profane. If there is any obscenity, it has crept into his verses inadvertently. However, Dryden reminds them that their authors are unanswerable for them. Dryden asserts he has chosen only such fables that contain some instructive moral in them. Dryden is obviously thinking of Jeremy Collier, whose structures he accepted in humility. Homer and Virgil. Dryden expresses a desire to translate the whole Iliad. In this connection, he makes no secret of his preference for Homer for, as he puts it, for him, Homer to be more pleasing task than translating Virgil. For the Grecian is more according to my genius than the Latin poet. Virgil is of a quite sedate temper, whereas Homer is violent, impetuous, and full of fire. Virgil's chief talent is property of thoughts and ornament of words, whereas Homer is rapid in his thoughts and takes all the liberties both of numbers, that is meters and expression style. So here he highlights that Virgil is very quite calm and silent, whereas Virgil is quite opposite to him. So Homer is very fast, rapid in his thought. There is no liberty for him in writing meter and expression, whereas Virgil is very, very quiet in writing the number of lines and using the style, everything is limited. So finally, he concludes that if Homer had not shown the way, it was not in Virgil to have begun heroic poetry. Aeneid looks like the second part of Iliad, a continuation of the same story and the same person already formed. The manners of Aeneas are those of Hector's. I'm sorry. The adventures of Ulysses in the Odyssey are imitated in the first six books of Virgil's Aeneid. But Dryden hastens to add that this does not in any contradictory what he has said elsewhere in Virgil's praise. But this proves, however, that Homer taught Virgil to design. The design is the disposition, arrangement, the manner, and the thoughts are all before it. Homer and Virgil being very different in their temperament. Each of them excels in his own way because each has followed his own natural inclination, both in forming the design and in the execution of it. Sorry. The action of Homer is more vigorous than that of Virgil, according to temperament of the writer, and therefore more pleasing to the reader. One warms you by degrees, the other sets you on fire at once and never intermits the heat. In all that, he concludes that he has translated the first book of Iliad with a greater pleasure than any part of Virgil, Ovid, and Chaucer. Then he compares Ovid and Chaucer. The golden age of Roman tongue ended with Ovid. The purity of English tongue began only from the Chaucer. As therefore Manus, Dryden says, both poets are well-bred, well-natured, amorous, and libertine. This is true of their writings. I'm sorry. It may be true of their two lives. Their studies were the same, philosophy and literature. Both of them had knowledge of astronomy. Neither was a great inventor. But Ovid only copied from the Grecian fables. Most of the Chaucer stories were taken from his Italian contemporaries. Dryden says, the genius of our countryman is general, is rather to improve an invention than to invent themselves. Chaucer is some with invention, though he cites the wife of Bard tales, the nun priest tale, the former not being a Chaucerian invention. Sorry. Chaucer makes our sight reasonable on his deathbed. Most of his stories have introduced many characters like Knight, Philemon, Orchid, Emilia. There are many actually. Dryden remarks that Ovid on the occasion would have made Orchid only, but whereas Chaucer presented many new characters. There are sometimes a beauty, sometimes a fault, depending upon whether they used properly or improperly. So Dryden points out that they must be avoided because passions are serious and will admit no play. Since Chaucer writes with great simplicity, I'm sorry, with great simplicity and follows nature closely, he does not use them. So Dryden's view on Chaucer. Dryden proceeds to make a masterly analysis of Chaucer's achievement as a poet. But his central aim is to give the reader a sense of Chaucer's literary character and his achievements. And also, I already told you that the main aim of the text is to project that his countryman Chaucer is a good poet and a good writer. A variety of tools are used to build up a picture of both a man and his works and of the effect of his work on the reader. So Dryden praises Chaucer that he has used different varieties of tool in order to present his characters as a picture, and as well as he mastered them in his writing. David Ditches regards Dryden remark on Chaucer on the whole as the model of one kind of practical criticism. So now here Dryden declares Chaucer as the father of English poetry, whereas Grecian held German or the Romans, Virgil is a perpetual fountain of good sense, learned in all science, and therefore speaks properly on all subjects. And he admires that Chaucer is the father of English poetry. And he says that Chaucer follows nature everywhere and in all his characters. When he speaks about the Chaucer's life, he says he had lived in the period of three different kings: Henry IV, Richard II, and he is a follower of the Wycliffe, and Edward III, actually. And he has written works in Italy, French, and as well as in English. And after completing the critical analysis on Chaucer's work, he says he prices here is God's plenty, because there are a variety of games springing up before him that he does not know which of them is to follow. And he says that here is God plenty. So Chaucer is the one who portrays amazing variety of characters in a realistic way. Chaucer gives to his portrait, Dryden says, mankind being always these men and women were to be found in the 17th century England, though they were called by other name than this monk, friar, canon, abbesses, nuns, any one actually. So Chaucer projected all type of characters in his prologue to the Canterbury Tales. And now he opens to answer the question why he translated Chaucer. One is that Chaucer is a dry, old-fashioned wit, not worthy receiving. But Dryden answers that Chaucer is a kind, rough diamond and must be polished before he shines. He does not deny that Chaucer sometimes mingled trivial things with more important. Sometimes he runs riot like Ovid, and he does not know when he has said enough. It is the business of the artist to select. He says an author is not to write all he can, but only all he ought. But Dryden says he has not tied himself to a literal translation, but he could omit whatever in his judgment appeared unnecessary. Then he compares Chaucer with Boccaccio. Both of them wrote novels and each of them cultivated his mother tongue. The greatest resemblance between Boccaccio and Chaucer is their style, the pleasing way of relating comical adventures. Since he has translated no comical tales of Boccaccio, Dryden says that he will consider only the serious part of poetry. So here he concludes that Boccaccio is very serious. There is no comic part in his poetry, whereas Chaucer treated both serious as well as comic, and he judged equally and he presented in the same number in all his characters. And in the next section, he replies to his critic. He had been commented by two people. One is Jeremy Collier and other one is Milburn and Blackmore actually. Jeremy Collier actually offends against as George Watson, what I said actually. And he answers for these the people. And Milburn specially attacks his poem. The reading public has a more favorable opinion on them. He has taken some pains with my poetry, but nobody will persuade to take same with his. Dryden replies that he would have had more sense than to write libels on his parishioners. Dryden then dismisses Milburn with the contempt he deserves. Then he answers for the comment which is made by Collier. He says that there is no more obscenity in Fletcher's work which he has translated, and also he concludes that Collier has lost much ground by perceiving his point too far, like the Prince of Kant and the Battle of Senepe. From immoral place to no place seems to be in he task. So both Blackmore and Milburn are only distinguished from the crowd by being remembered for their infamy. So let me summarize the whole text actually. I already told you that the major purpose of writing this is to praise his countryman Chaucer as a great poet and a great writer. And he has translated the first book of Homer's Iliad. Then he translated the 12 books of Ovid Metamorphoses. And he compares Ovid and Chaucer. And he says that Ovid is a golden age of mother tongue, whereas Chaucer began his literary career when English tongue was in the initial period, in the beginning period. And he compares Chaucer with Boccaccio, and he says that both lived in the same country, same genius, same studies, but their preface is diatribe against some of the critics like Luke Milburn and Richard Blackmore and other things. This is how he concludes the essay Preface to Fables. And these are the key terms which help you to understand the technical terms, the names which I have used in the text, and these are all terminal questions. Thank you.